This is the Automotive Repair Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Speak Up Effective Communication, the show on the Automotive Repair Podcast Network focusing on elevating our communication and our leadership skills. I'm your host, Craig O'Neill, and in our episode today, we're going to talk about a culture pitfall that can seriously hamper an organization, especially when you're trying to institute meaningful change with a real champion inside of it. And what happens when that change agent does not get the backing that they need? So when I talk on change management, I like to introduce the concerns-based adoption model. CBAM is actually how it's pronounced. That's how I pronounce it. There might be some people pronouncing it kabam, but it's a framework called the concerns-based adoption model. And it has this ladder of concern that helps illustrate. It's very helpful for illustrating how people move through an adoption process. And I'm going to share a slide on that after our break. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have a slide there. You won't need the slide to be able to receive this topic if you're listening only, but this is part of a presentation. I was working on a class that I'll be working on a workshop actually with George Kingman from Advanced Shop Leadership. And this is one of the topics that I'll be dealing with in the workshop. And while I was reviewing this stuff, I had just kind of a moment of clarity and inspiration to develop out further portions, specifically dealing with personal objections and the pitfalls that come from that. So that's why we have this episode. And by the time you hear this on Monday, I'll have already done the workshop with George over the weekend in Chicago. So hopefully we'll see you at another one that we do in the near future. But funny enough, as I was doing this topic, I was dealing with the concerns-based adoption model and that ladder, and then I was dealing with the concept of a spiral down, and all of a sudden I was left remembering the childhood game Chutes and Ladders, and that is just kind of a funny concept that came to mind as this all pulled together. But this episode will have two parts, and we're going to start with the ladder, which is the beginning part. That's kind of a play on words here too. We'll just go on to the word of the day. How about that? Today's word is attrition. And we will come back with a full definition of that word after we hear a word from our sponsors who make this show possible. Your partner in technology, AutoFlow is able to enhance your client interactions before, during, and after the visit from a single thread. To see how AutoFlow makes it simple, visit autoflow.com. Your trusted companion, ShopDog Marketing, is right by your side, attracting the best customers and building long-term growth. Call ShopDog Marketing today or visit shopdogmarketing.com. Cover your communication need and revolutionize your auto repair business with AI-driven call analytics from Inbound. Explore more at callinbound.com. Want a more profitable shop? Start with your service advisor. They are the face of your business, the voice on the phone, and the key to every approved repair. ServiceAdvisorTraining.com is dedicated to giving them the tools and training they deserve. Okay, we are back, and our word of the day is attrition. That is a noun, and it is defined like this. That is the process of reducing something through sustained pressure or gradual wearing down, often without direct confrontation. And the etymology on that one's actually really interesting. If you dive into that stuff or are curious about that like I am, it's from Latin, and it had the meaning of rubbing against. Interestingly, in medieval theology, it referred to imperfect contrition being like true remorse. And so this was a wearing away of guilt that stopped short of genuine transformation. But later on, it entered military usage to describe the wearing down of an enemy, not by decisive battle or true victory, but by a slow, continuous erosion. Gosh, that sounds like some of the conflicts in the world today, or maybe the conflict right there in your shop. So in practice, your culture is determined by the worst behavior that management tolerates, and the most painful attrition comes with the loss of our best people. That's right. Unfortunately, it is not our best people that always get to dictate the culture, but it is our worst people that are tolerated. That brings us to section 1 on the ladder. And before we talk about why change fails, I think it's important that we do understand how change is supposed to work. And it goes through a natural process. And it will look like this. Now, if you're looking on our screen or watching this through the app, you will see on the screen the CBAM, ladder of concern, but this is laid out a little different than maybe you've seen charts on concerns-based adoption model. I like it this way. This was the most helpful visual that when I was implementing things early on in my career with AutoFlow, helping shops institute digital technology, this was important for me to understand and apply, because the rule is you really can't skip the rungs on the ladder. And a lot of times when you're implementing processes, it's very tempting to go to whatever it is that you want to implement, and you ignore the individuals who have to do that implementation and deal with their thoughts and feelings on a thing. This visual helps you see exactly how this is laid out, right? The me, it, us is the specific segments that I want to draw attention to. You deal with the individual, then you can talk about what it is that you're going to be doing as a team and improve it. And then once that's in place with new habits and skills, you will do the us section where you're just renewal, refinement. It's just your constant state of improvements at that point. So those are the three broad categories, the me, it, and us. And the me concerns have to come first. And these are the personal feelings and the prior knowledge that a person brings into whatever's being asked of them. And it seems obvious that you would need to address these before moving forward. But like I said, a lot of organizations skip this entirely and go straight to the it and expect everybody to follow along, regardless of whatever is happening on the inside of the person. And when you do that, you create internal conflicts that most managers were never equipped to handle because nobody told them that those conflicts were coming, and they may just not be in the authority position they need. We won't go into the whole CBAM thing, but the it concerns typically follow. And this is where the person really begins engaging with the thing itself. They'll say things like, it is taking longer. I'm spending more time working on this. And over time, you push through this, and they start to look outside of themselves, and they wonder how it's actually affecting clients and whether it's going well and whether the effort's actually producing any results. And if you really make it this far to that it rung, it's the blue section if you're looking at it on the stream, you're usually going to be in good shape, provided you can push through what the CBAM calls the implementation dip. And that's going to be a dip in performance that occurs whenever you're starting something new, when you're trying to learn a new tool or a technique, or if you're a martial artist and you're trying to learn a new kata, you're going to do terrible at it, even though you know the basic motions, right? This is one of those periods where reduced performance is initially looked at sometimes as like, oh, this isn't working. This is worse than we were before. We should quit. And they do. This happens all the time. That implementation dip is scary. Probably a whole episode just on communicating out of that and leading out of that. And then there's the us. And that, like we mentioned, that's just the refinement phase. So like I said, we could do multiple episodes on CBAM alone. I hope we do. And I actually have some friends that are involved in project management as a career, and I would love to have them on and talk about some of these things. They have some great strategies to get people aligned. But today, I want to focus on just that one specific rung in the me category. It is that personal objection rung inside of that me category. The me category, for those of you that aren't looking at the graphic, starts with awareness, information, and then there's this personal. Awareness says, I don't need this. They don't know what the benefits are. They haven't been made aware of the outcomes that they could enjoy if the change is applied. The information rung is going to be like, how does this work? We need to know how it works so that we can do anything with it and even develop and flesh out the rest of our feelings and opinions on the thing. And that personal rung is the last piece there. And the question I need somebody to ask to get out of that rung is the question, what do I need to do? Now, they may ask the question, don't think, hey, I'm almost there, because they might actually get the answer and not like it and give you a hard refusal. But a lot of times they won't even ask the question if you're dealing with a straight up, hard, personal objection from an individual who is now the roadblock between meaningful change and success, right? Why do people get stuck in this personal rung would be the question. What types of reasons do they have? There's only finite reasons, theoretically, that individuals have. I think they all can get categorized kind of neatly, and we're going to try to do that. The mistake that I see most managers make at this stage is assuming the resistance is about the thing being implemented. And I have another slide here that I put forward. It's basically the CBAM just showing the lower part of the rung, but there's a brick wall between the personal element and the question of what do I need to do? And why would somebody put up that wall? The resistance is usually not about whether the process is good. It's about something underneath. And if you keep arguing about the process and what the real issue is, and you keep trying to re-explain what the benefits are, and here's how it works, and what the benefits are, and here's how it works, and what the benefits are, and you never actually probe far enough to find out what their true objection is, you will not go anywhere. And this is one of the most uncomfortable parts of managing teams, is having to probe past the initial defenses that they put up in front of you and the initial reasons that they have, and find out, like we were talking about sort of in a previous episode, something a little bit deeper, something further in. We are dealing with feelings, by the way. This is where, if you don't find that true reasoning and understand people's feelings, it's going to feel, maybe some of you older managers, I'm calling out age here. Sometimes I know that there's a group of us of my age and older that gets a little frustrated with having to deal with feelings. Like, we just did what we're told when we were kids. That attitude doesn't really help deal with feelings. And a lot of times you may remember being told to do something, and you just did something because you were told, not because you believed in the thing. Maybe you eventually believed, but we'll get to that later. I want to discuss and name 6 specific things that I see as personal barriers that people put. 4 are personal nature anyway. 2 are actually systemic. And we're going to name them not to pathologize your colleagues, but because you can't address what you cannot name. And because recognizing that these things are sometimes in the room, it's what's going to separate whether a leader has the capacity to be able to help people climb from one rung to the other versus a leader who wonders why nobody ever gets out of that rung. Even people who are resisting change, they do not want the organization to fail. Most of them. And maybe you have some unique special person that I fortunately have never met, but in most cases, they're resisting for reasons that feel rational to them. They want things to go well. Villainizing the resistant employee is probably always the wrong move, and it will almost always make things worse. But we're going to try to identify some of these reasons. I have a slide up here for the first 4 as well. You don't need to look at this if you are watching online. Great, you'll see it on a slide. But there's 4 things. The first one is the identity threat. So as a personal barrier, you have an identity threat. And in this situation, the employee may not know the process works, but adopting it means implicitly admitting the old way was wrong and that people will have feelings about. And the old way was theirs. They built their professional identity around the way things are now. And changing feels like, not like growth, but more like it's a concession. Like they're being asked to say out loud that what they did for the last 10 years was not good enough. And most people won't ever articulate that. They'll find other reasons to object instead. And I ran into this in my own experience in the family business when I wanted to change things from the way my grandfather had always done them. You gotta remember, the facility was his. This was his baby. Any change I proposed probably sounded to him like criticism of something he had built and was proud of. Knowing what I know now, I probably would have led those conversations very differently. Because what I thought were simple suggestions, he heard as complaints. And that's probably how I delivered them, especially in my youth. And that'll happen. Then there's authority resistance. And that's when the objection's not about the process or the thing that you're changing at all. It's about who is requiring it. When compliance feels like losing a quiet competition with, maybe it's sort of not a colleague, but a frenemy type of a figure that you're competing with. This shows up especially when the person championing the change is junior or newer in a role to the resistant employee. And they may not fully respect that person. Again, it's not the what, it's the who. And there are a lot of reasons this happens. And I couldn't speculate on all of them. Just know that this is a real situation that occurs. And it seems petty, and maybe it is. And there's ego involved. Absolutely. But arguing harder about the process typically doesn't fix that. The third thing is the perceived cost. It's the perceived cost versus benefit. And this is when the employee's running typically a private calculation that they haven't ever articulated outwardly. They're weighing the personal effort and exposure required against the benefit they expect to receive, and they have concluded on their own that it's not worth it, whatever the change is. Even if data does not support that, you have all the evidence of the world, scientific studies, J.D. Power says this, revenue reports from everybody that's implemented said this, they're not going to pay attention to these things. Again, they're making decisions for their rationale, but it's with their information. This isn't always going to seem rational. but to them, it's real. It will not be argued away with better data. It has to be addressed at the level of the calculation they're making themselves. And until you get them to articulate that calculation, you have probably no chance of being able to successfully combat that. And the fourth of the personal barriers is the loss of informal power. And I want to spend a minute on this one because some processes redistribute visibility. Digital inspections, where I've spent a vast part of my career now focused on this, I see this. Digital inspections will bring into the light things that used to live in the dark. A mechanical specialist who has thrived because nobody could see exactly what was happening in their bay will resist a digital vehicle inspection, not because the inspection's bad, but because transparency threatens this sort of informal power structure that they've built through opacity. Right? They cannot say this out loud, so they will say something else. And this is an uncomfortable truth in this industry. I work in the realm of digital inspections, so I do encounter this. And when you have someone producing off the chart sales numbers at a top grossing location, only the most engaged and ethical owners are going to want to look closely at whether those numbers are, I guess, how will we say, too good to be true? Sometimes you're not going to like the answer. An owner who is afraid to ask the question, however, is going to suffer the consequences to their culture. And that's where we get into these next two items. It's time for today's Suck Less Spotlight from AutoFlow. Today's spotlight is on advisor eye twitches. Listen, clients like to stay informed throughout the repair process, and studies indicate clients are most satisfied receiving text updates versus phone calls. But call you they will, interrupting everything from estimating to quality conversations and your game of solitaire. That is, unless you text them first using AutoFlow. With AutoFlow's automated text updates, your phone only rings for the right reasons. That way, with less phone interruptions, your eye twitch will definitely suck less. For this and more things that could suck less, visit AutoFlow.com. Ready to boost your auto repair shop's success? ShopDog Marketing is here to help you. We put customers first using AI to create standout content that ranks. Harness the power of mobile first and voice search and let our expert team help you sweeten your revenue with more car count. ShopDog Marketing offers a free guide on using AI to drive more repair orders. Get your guide today and watch your auto repair shop thrive. Visit shopdogmarketing.com. Every professional auto repair shop needs a trusted communication partner. At Inbound, our established VoIP platform is backed by years of industry experience, guarantees reliable connections, and is combined with cutting-edge AI-powered analytics. We deliver actionable insights that support your business growth. With Inbound, you get more than just calls. You get a smarter, more efficient operation. Get Inbound on your team today and see how we can transform your business. Visit callinbound.com. What if you knew exactly what to say to the price shopper, the upset customer, the person who says they cannot afford it? Every day, service advisors lose customers not because of bad service, but because of the wrong words at the wrong moment. Words That Work is a free phone scripts playbook built for auto service professionals. Every script includes the reasoning behind it, so you understand not just what to say, but why it works. Grab your free copy at serviceadvisortraining.com. These look like personal resistance, but the source is actually systemic. The first of these two barriers, I'll call this one delegated accountability without authority. So I'm going to say it again, delegated accountability without authority. This person who's a barrier is going to come up against this systemic problem. So the person that's a barrier is fighting against the person who has been delegated accountability but has no authority. Think about a junior manager now having to tell someone who was their superior moments before perhaps what to do and that this is what we're going to do. And it doesn't go well. This is the person championing the process. It's when they don't have the organizational weight to compel compliance. The resistant employee knows this. They do the math. They know they can wait it out if they don't want to do the thing. And if the person asking them to change cannot actually enforce anything, attrition is a viable strategy, so they wait. And that is common. You get a bright-eyed youngster that wants to implement a new process, and they come right up against the grizzled veteran in your shop, and conflict ensues. Now, the next one is sort of related to this, and this is owner ambiguity. This is when leadership tolerates the resistance quietly to protect a revenue relationship. So it's like that last barrier we discussed where we were talking about the loss of informal power. So owner ambiguity avoids difficult conversation, or simply because they're not sure if the change is worth it, doesn't want to have the conflict. The signal that sends to the resistant employee is unmistakable, and it says you can stay where you are. And the signal it sends to everyone else in the organization is also super clear that this does not actually matter that much. Now, if you try to coach an individual out of resistance that's being silently sustained by a leadership failure, you probably will not succeed unless you are off the charts influential. It is a tough spot. And I see people stuck in it, managers stuck and frustrated in it all the time. And the owner has to step in and sometimes just will not do it. So frustrating to watch. And it happens in the largest organizations and some very successful ones at that. In those cases, the environment is the problem, and the individual is just responding to it accurately. They know how to thrive in their environment the way it is, and they have some comfort and sustainability there. And so change is not something that they're interested in. I do want to add, and this is something I talk about in multiple presentations, that when you're coaching shared urgency, this is the topic that we're going to move into. Change requires this. I have this up on a slide for those watching. The owner is engaged and communicates seriousness. That's number one. If you lack this, change is it's not going to happen successfully in most cases, unless you have just an amazing team that is motivated to do things without any guidance from you, which is an extraordinarily rare thing. The owner must be engaged and communicate the seriousness. Number two is the implementers need to understand the need, the why. The implementers, the people who are going to make it happen, have to know why they're doing it. My dad had a great quote. He always said regarding technicians specifically, technicians never do anything unless they understand why they're doing it. I think that's fair. Number three is that there is a shared sense of urgency, that we agree on what and on how, and we will act on that. And that's where we're going to move into the next segment here, because there are 4 people on your team, any given team, and 3 of them are energy vampires, according to Brendan Wovchiko. He's with the Ramsey Solutions Group. And I first encountered his framework at the same time that I was learning about the CBAM approach, while I was also reading the book Miller's Bolt by Thomas Sturr. Miller's Bolt was a book referred to me by Rick White. We talked about it on a podcast with Carm way back. I want to be careful here, because when we start talking about the shared urgency, I have this up on a slide as well. The 4 types of team members look an awful lot like labels. And remember, Thomas Sturr's book, if those of you haven't read Miller's Bolt, is really good. He has a good quote in there. Here it is. Once you put a label on someone, your brain goes on scan, looking for evidence to support your beliefs. So I want to be careful that we're not labeling individuals here. We're labeling behaviors. And these behaviors are something that individuals can move in and out of in between. And I want to remind every one of us here that I've been every one of these roles that we're going to discuss, and you have been every one of these roles that we're about to discuss as well. These roles are the quitter, the antagonist, the mercenary, and the crusader. And what determines which role is which is their ability to do 2 things: act or argue. That is, take action, do a thing that you need to do, or argue, discuss it, debate it, reach a mutual decision. People need to be able to do both things in order to be truly effective team members, and those individuals who can do both things are the crusaders. But let's talk about these first 3, as Wovchiko would call energy vampires. The quitter, this person won't act or argue. They just don't engage. They've already checked out. The present body absent investment. They do not push back openly. They do not push forward either. They are simply not there for it. The antagonist, well, they will argue, but they will not act. They have opinions and they will share them. They will tell you exactly what's wrong with any new process, why it will not work, why the last initiative failed, why this one will too, but they will not lift a hand to change anything. The argument is their form of activity, and they might even consider that discussion valuable input and work. Yeah, we've all been that. Just admit it. We can all be antagonists, but we also know that person on our team. They're very comfortable with prolonged misalignment, as Wojcicki would say. It was one of my keynotes from his presentation on that. Like, an individual that's very happy with prolonged misalignment is just not great on the team. They need to figure out how to actually make a decision and act on it and make it work, and with true agreement. Now, the mercenary, this one's interesting because it's kind of the head down, nose to the grindstone, a hard worker in most shops and high producers often. They'll act, but they won't argue. They will do what they are told, follow the checklist, run the inspection, but they are not invested in it. They're not compliant, not committed. And the day accountability disappears, they probably will wane on that behavior too. We don't have time to go into why and how to coach each one of those things. It's probably a whole separate topic. But what I do want to talk about is that crusader personality. The crusader is the one that will act and will argue until they reach a mutual decision with you, aligned values, and go. Wojcicki had a really good quote on that. I'm going to try to recall it correctly. The crusader personality is the only one that will say, what's important to you is important to me. I love that. I think that's very true. They carry the flag. They implement change. They understand your vision and implement it. If you've been to the rocket fuel topic of the visionary and the integrator, I would think of the crusader as the integrator, right? They agree with your vision and they're going to make it happen. I want to talk about the spiral. So I have a slide up on this as well, because I think this is interesting. We talked about a ladder before. Now we're on the chutes. Because here's the thing that I think is important to remember. And this is the thing that is easily forgotten about those crusader types. They are not made necessarily of something different. They're not a fixed personality type either. You have or you don't have this ability. They're people who found something worth believing in a place where believing is possible and rewarded. The operative word is in the place. When a crusader operates in an environment where personal objections go unaddressed and leadership has not established shared urgency, something happens, not all at once, not dramatically. It's attrition. The slow rubbing away we defined earlier. And here is what the descent looks like. And stage one. So think about it leadership-wise before we go into the ladder any further. When you have a young leader coming up against your grizzled veteran, they're ready to implement change. You agree with your implementer on a vision, but you haven't communicated to the team and you haven't given this implementer any authority whatsoever. What happens to this individual? Do they get to champion the change in your shop, in your organization? Or are they going to hit such resistance that something happens to them? And that's what I have watched over time is individuals who wanted to implement change don't get the support they need. And they silently just become something else in the organization. Stage one, that's the belief phase. The crusader arrives with a genuine conviction. They advocate openly. They volunteer to help train a colleague. They send follow-ups, ask the owner directly, are we going to address what happened in Tuesday's meeting? They're engaged in the whole way. But by stage two in the spiral, they look around and find that the urgency is theirs alone. Leadership's not carrying the flag. Only they are. And the resistant employee is stonewalling without any kind of consequence whatsoever. So the crusader's out on the ledge all by themselves. Stage three, there's a signal phase here. The antagonist remains comfortable, maybe even celebrated because they produce revenue or because confronting them is just too awkward, so we let it go. The signal sent to everyone, including the crusader, is that resistance has no cost. In stage four is when you hit erosion. This is the crusader's passion, where it begins to just feel like pressure or annoyance, perhaps, to the rest of the team members. Mercenaries have already learned that acting without arguing produces peace, and the crusader senses their advocacy is creating friction rather than momentum. They don't want to be the source of a problem, so they begin to go quiet. Now, stage five is collapse. They stop arguing. Not because they change their mind. They may still believe in the process because the environment has made believing too expensive, the fire is gone. In spirit, they have now become a mercenary. They act, but they no longer argue. And that flag is on the ground. Change is dead. Stage 6, and this is the cost no one notices, the facility has actually lost its best change agent. And it doesn't even know it yet because the numbers haven't moved. The antagonist is still there. The process never changed. And the owner wonders why nothing ever sticks in his shop and everything stays the same. It's the CBAM in reverse. Started with a us mindset with a great champion. They argued about it for a while, realized it's fruitless, and then they just start looking out for themselves. You took someone who was team and organization oriented and you turned them into an individual that doesn't care. And this is the death of culture in any organization. It's a simple spiral, and it does this thanks to a lack of leadership. You can't allow that culture crisis to occur in your shop. I think it's a useful illustration, though. So don't worry, you're not missing anything if you're not watching here. I just want to pause and say something directly to you. There's a very good chance you have been all 4 of these people, as I have, at different points in your career, at different facilities, at different ages, as we mature, under different owners, under different conditions. You've been the quitter. Maybe you've burned out one too many times. Maybe you've been burned too many times. Maybe a process you believed in got canceled after 3 weeks. Maybe you watched someone get promoted who did nothing to deserve it. You stopped investing. You've probably been the antagonist, as I have. Maybe you had real reasons. Maybe the process was poorly designed, like some parts of the building and the family business. My goodness. Maybe nobody asked you for your input, but you're going to make sure you're heard anyway. Maybe you've been the mercenary, as I have, just doing the job, doing it well even, but not letting yourself care too much about whether it worked. Self-protection can look like professionalism to a lot of people, like that guy gets the job done kind of a guy. Guys, I retreated to a mechanical role to avoid having to try to implement changes in the family business for a while. I totally went in that mode and it was an absolute escape. But if you're lucky, you have also been the crusader. You've walked into a place where someone was carrying the flag and it was safe to believe and you believed too. You picked up the flag, you ran with it. The question now isn't really which one you are. The question is which one the culture is allowing you to be right now. And can you replicate yourself if you are that? The goal in any organization is to have a team of crusaders who replicate themselves. And one person operating as a sustained antagonist will spread a very different kind of culture. As a leader, the question you have to ask yourself is whether you are creating the conditions for crusaders to thrive. And the hard question when I'm in consulting is like, people will ask me this, and I hate the question. It's like, do we have to get rid of this guy? It's like, man, there's so much history involved in that sort of thing. But I'll tell you this, my patience is worn thin over the years watching cultures fall apart because people taking too long to either correct bad behavior and get someone out of the way versus anything else. The good people will start performing worse far before a bad person will start performing better. Remember, it's the bad examples that tend to get replicated more easily in any organization. So let me offer you the principle that anchors on this. Your culture, once again, I say this a lot, your culture is determined by the worst behavior that management tolerates. I do say this a lot and I'll acknowledge it again, but sit with it in the context of everything we've covered today. If the antagonist on your team is allowed to stonewall a process, roll out without consequence, you have told every crusader in your facility that their belief is not safe. You have told every mercenary that compliance is optional, and you've told every quitter that they've made the right call and they can just float on through in your shop. And you've confirmed for the resistant employee that every personal objection they are carrying, whether it is identity threat, authority resistance, loss of informal power, or anything else, it does not need to be resolved. It just needs to be outlasted. Shared urgency is not a personal trait. It's not something that you hope your team develops on their own either. It is a leadership responsibility to cultivate exactly that and build a team with that. If the owner is not carrying the flag, nobody else can carry it far enough either. And you can delegate accountability, but if you cannot delegate the authority to go with it, the person carrying your project is already set up to fail before they start, and the resistant employee knows that. They will wait out a project manager who has no real authority every single time. And the latter, does only go up one rung at a time. It takes attention, and constant signals from leadership in a way that matters. We're doing this, right? The personal concerns of a resistant employee have to be addressed directly and honestly, and that you have to climb this ladder with people. It's going to be one rung at a time, and if they're either coached toward that outcome or they're going to be coached out, because the chute is always right there, and that's way faster than the ladder climb. So where that leaves us today, if you're a shop owner or an operations manager, I hope you're asking yourself an honest question tonight. Who on your team is carrying the flag for something you said mattered? And what are you doing to make sure they don't have to carry it alone? And what personal objections are you aware of that you have not addressed directly because addressing them felt harder than tolerating them? It takes a strong owner to make change happen in the shop. Now, if you're a service advisor or you're a mechanical specialist, I hope you recognize yourself somewhere in these 4 types. And I hope you remember that which one you are is not fixed. The crusader is not a permanent condition either, but neither is the quitter. People move. The question is always which direction the culture is going to be pulling, and how are you helping to pull the culture in the right direction? If you are in the spiral right now and you can identify that, if you are the person who used to believe and has gone quiet, I'd be glad to hear from you. The fire does not go out for nothing. It went out because the environment made it expensive to keep it lit. That is a fact, and that's worth talking about. And there are people who can help you navigate that and perhaps have a conversation with your owners. That's fun. For some of us, it's a fun conversation because we've gotten more comfortable with challenging people and giving them direct feedback. And a lot of the people I know, best intentions in the world, absolutely want to make a difference and make positive changes. There's just no question. It's when we can get out of our own way with new relationships that help. That's fantastic. And hey, if you're in the place where believing is absolutely the reality and that's possible, man, protect that, help build that. Do not take it for granted. Cherish that team and work to replicate that culture. Shared urgency is a gift when it is cultivated in an organization. And in its absence, well, that may be the most expensive thing any organization will ever see, and it never shows up directly on that financial statement. But hey, we appreciate hearing from you on anything that helps or suggestions on topics you'd like to hear us discuss on the show that will help you on your communication and leadership journey. In this episode, we hit on both elements of that. Email me here, speakup@CraigO'Neill.net. That's ONEILL. And remember, listen up on the app to all the shows on the Automotive Repair Podcast Network. We have Remarkable Results Radio with Carm Capriato, Diagnosing the Aftermarket A through Z with Matt Fonslow, Business by the Numbers with Hunt Demarest, the Auto Repair Marketing Podcast with Brian and Kim Walker, and the Weekly Blitz with Coach Chris Cotton. So once again, thank you for joining us. And thank you, our sponsors, for making the show possible. ServiceAdvisorTraining.com, ShopDog Marketing, AutoFlow, and Call Inbound. Now get out there, folks. Listen up, speak up, and I guess climb up that ladder. Deal with those concerns. Thank you.
You've been listening to Speak Up, Effective Communication with Craig O'Neill on the Automotive Repair Podcast Network. Download our exclusive podcast app at automotiverepairpodcastnetwork.com because the best conversations in the industry start here. Check the show notes for Craig's YouTube channel and email. Let him know what topics you'd like him to speak up about.